The forest never spoke, but some said it listened. Some said it remembered, and some said it waited. There was a path once, not marked, not mapped, only walked by those who were called. Among those was Jonah, who came from a place with streetlights, car horns, and cell towers. He came with tired hands and a rusted key, not knowing what it opened, only that it arrived in a letter without a sender, and with it a message, written in crooked black ink, that said, "The house is yours now." Jonah had laughed once, folded the paper twice, and thrown it away. But the next morning, the key was still there on his windowsill, lying heavy and cold, as if it had always been waiting for his fingers to wrap around it like a lock waiting for its voice. He left the city without telling anyone, not even a goodbye to the friends who had already started fading into the background like old wallpaper patterns. He drove for hours, maybe days. The road stretched like veins across places with no names. Signs blurred, trees leaned in closer with each passing mile. Until, at last, his car gave out just before the edge of a narrow dirt path that led into the forest, where the air hung thick and still and full of something that felt older than time. He walked with the key in his palm, and the path curved like it was remembering each step with him, leading him deeper into silence. Until he saw it through the trees, the house, the one from the dreams he never remembered having. Tall, narrow windows like watching eyes, a door that looked like it never closed right, a roof too steep for any reason, and walls that breathed when the wind moved. And yet the place felt still, not abandoned, not decayed, only paused, like something waiting to begin again. He stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned, not from weight, but from recognition, and the door opened before he touched it, as if the house had been listening this whole time, and was finally letting out a long, quiet breath. Inside, the air was cold, not empty, but heavy, like it had been sitting untouched for centuries. But without dust, without cobwebs, without signs of life or signs of death, only rooms that were exactly as they should be, and exactly as they shouldn't. And when Jonah crossed the threshold, he forgot the sky behind him. The world he came from shrank until only the walls mattered, only the heartbeat in the floorboards, only the key that vanished once he closed the door behind him. He explored slowly, each room whispering things he didn't say aloud. The furniture knew him, the mirrors flinched when he passed, and the wallpaper moved when he looked too long. It was not hallucination, it was memory, not his, but the house's. And it was remembering him, piece by piece, dream by dream, night by night. At night, he heard footsteps, not above, not below, but within the walls. A steady pacing that stopped when he listened, and resumed when he looked away. And sometimes voices, not words, but rhythms like lullabies, hummed by voices that had long forgotten language. Sometimes the lights flickered, sometimes they pulsed, and sometimes they stayed on even when he turned the switches off. The second week, the house grew larger, not with construction, not with renovation, but with unfolding rooms that hadn't been there before or had been hiding until he was ready. The doors led to staircases that led to halls that curved back into themselves. Sometimes he would walk for hours, only to find the same chair waiting for him in a room that smiled when he entered. One night, he found a journal beneath the floorboard, blank except for one page. It said, "Do not leave the lights off for more than 1 hour or it will come. Do not sleep with the windows open, and if you hear the second heartbeat, leave the room until morning. And if you see yourself, do not speak, do not blink, do not breathe until it is gone." Jonah laughed and closed the book. But that night, the power went out, and he heard it. The second heartbeat, slower, heavier, like something waking up beneath the floor. He waited in the hallway, too afraid to move, too afraid to stay. Until morning came and the lights returned. But the air was colder, and the mirrors now showed things they shouldn't. By the third month, he no longer remembered how long he'd been there. Time had softened, clocks stopped ticking, and shadows moved against the walls like fish beneath the surface of dark water. He ate but never felt full. He slept but never woke up rested. Outside the windows, there was only forest, deeper than it should be, and sky darker than it used to be. And then came the knocking. It was not at the front door or any door. It came from behind the walls, soft at first, like the rhythm of rain on old wood, then louder, then sharper, like nails against bone. He tried not to answer, but the house whispered, "You must." And he found himself standing in front of a door he had never seen before, smaller than the rest, with carvings he could not read. When he opened it, he saw a room filled with chairs, and all of them were occupied. They looked like him, not exactly, but close. Some older, some younger, some hollow, some dreaming, some looking directly at him. One stood and said, "You are the house now." Jonah felt the walls breathe in. Felt the floors shift beneath his skin. Felt the rooms pull away from him like a tide, and then collapse inward like lungs exhaling. He ran, but the hallways curved against him. The stairs led nowhere. The windows showed only more house, and the mirrors refused to reflect. Until at last, he stopped and breathed and sat. The house sighed, and so did he. Time passed, or maybe it didn't. The house does not keep time, it keeps memory. It keeps presence, it keeps those who are meant to be kept. Jonah was never meant to leave. Neither were the others who hum in the walls and knock when they remember how. So if you find a key with no name and a letter with no return address and the air smells like old wood and fog and silence, turn away. Turn back. Burn the letter and bury the key. If you do not, and if you follow the road, and if the forest lets you in, do not stay when the door opens on its own. Do not sleep with the window open. And if you hear the second heartbeat, know that you are already part of the house, and the house has already remembered your name. The air around the house thickened with a cold that seemed to seep into Jonah's bones and never leave. Each morning the forest outside grew darker, the trees closing ranks, twisting and turning as if alive. The sun struggled to pierce the canopy, and when it did, it cast long, unnatural shadows that crept closer with every step Jonah took. Inside the house, rooms shifted in impossible ways. Doorways led to other doorways, hallways bent in on themselves, and ceilings stretched so high he could not see their end. The wallpaper peeled and writhed, and sometimes he thought he saw faces pressed just beneath the surface, watching him. The furniture shifted too, chairs moved just out of sight, tables tilted slightly, and mirrors reflected not his face but scenes from other places he did not know but felt painfully familiar. Jonah's sleep became restless, haunted by dreams that felt more like memories. He wandered those dreams like a ghost, retracing steps through a forest full of whispers, past a river black as ink, under a sky that bled stars. A voice called to him there, soft and urgent, telling him secrets he could barely understand. During the days, the silence inside the house was oppressive. Sometimes it was broken by sounds, soft laughter just behind a closed door, footsteps pacing above him, or the unmistakable creak of the rocking chair that was never empty. When he called out, no one answered. When he tried to run, the house rearranged itself, corridors twisting back until he found himself back at the same spot, the same chair waiting. He noticed changes in himself. His reflection in the mirrors grew stranger, eyes that didn't blink, smiles that didn't reach the skin, shadows that moved with a mind of their own. His thoughts became fragmented, as if the house whispered inside his mind, weaving its will into his dreams and waking moments. He questioned what was real, what was memory, and what was something far older, something that waited beneath. One night, as the wind howled outside, he heard a whisper that wasn't his own voice. It came from the walls themselves, a soft chant in a language long forgotten, promising release, or perhaps doom. The lights flickered violently, plunging the house into darkness, and in that darkness, Jonah saw them, shapes moving in the corners of the rooms, waiting, watching, waiting for him to remember what he had forgotten. He tried to leave. He ran to the front door, but it was gone, replaced by a wall of twisted wood and creeping vines. Windows showed not the forest, but endless walls, stretching into shadows that seemed to swallow light itself. Fear settled deep in his chest, cold and steady, as the house closed in around him. The journal remained his only guide, its warnings etched in his mind. Do not leave the lights off for more than 1 hour, or it will come. Yet the power still failed at times, leaving him in a darkness thicker than night. Do not sleep with the windows open. But the windows no longer opened. If you hear the second heartbeat, leave the room until morning. He had heard it many times, a pulse deep beneath the floor, a drumbeat that grew louder when the house stirred. And then, one evening, the knocking began again. Louder, more insistent. It came from behind a door Jonah had never dared to open, a door smaller than the rest, carved with symbols he could not read but somehow understood. The knocking became a pounding, echoing through the halls, through his very bones. He knew then what the house wanted. It was not merely a place but a living thing, ancient and hungry, remembering those it had claimed before. It wanted Jonah to join the chorus, to become part of its endless memory, its infinite rooms, its whispering walls. The choice was not his to make. The days bled into nights without distinction, the house erasing time itself. Jonah's hands trembled as he moved through the halls, each step echoing louder than before. The walls seemed to pulse, alive with something ancient and patient. Sometimes he thought he heard whispering voices, faint but unmistakable, curling around the corners like smoke. He found himself drawn to the smaller door more and more often, the one that had once revealed the room full of chairs and his many versions, some broken, some whole, all waiting. The faces of those versions haunted him, reflections of paths not taken, lives left behind, echoes trapped in the house's endless memory. One night, he noticed a shadow flickering beneath the door. It moved with unnatural grace, stretching long fingers through the cracks. When he placed his ear to the wood, he heard a slow chant, an ancient song that tugged at his soul, promising escape and eternal rest. Fear and curiosity warred within him. He pushed the door open further, stepping inside the cramped room where the chairs waited. Each chair was occupied by a version of himself, eyes hollow, faces pale. One rose slowly and spoke in a voice that was his and yet not. "You belong here now," it said. "The house remembers all. We are the memory. We are the waiting." Jonah's heart thundered in his chest as he realized the truth. The house was not a building but a prison of souls, an endless loop of forgetting and remembering, where those who entered became part of its breath, its heartbeat, its voice. He tried to pull away, but the walls closed in. The floorboards beneath him shifted like living skin, wrapping around his feet, pulling him down into darkness deeper than night. Yet somewhere within that darkness, a spark of defiance flickered. Jonah clenched his fists, fighting the cold tendrils that sought to consume him. He remembered the key, cold and heavy in his pocket, and the letter that had brought him here. The key was not just a lock but a promise, a way out or a way in. He had to choose. The key burned cold in Jonah's hand, heavier now, as if it carried the weight of every soul the house had ever claimed. He pressed it against the door's carved surface and heard a groan like the house itself waking from a long slumber. The walls trembled, and the air thickened with whispers, voices folding around him like a shroud. With a deep breath, Jonah turned the key slowly in the lock, the sound echoing down endless halls. The door swung open to reveal not another room, but a corridor stretching into impossible darkness, endless and curling like a serpent's tail. He stepped inside, heart pounding, each footfall swallowed by silence. The walls pulsed faintly, alive with the memories trapped within, and shadows danced just beyond sight. It felt like walking inside a dream, or perhaps a nightmare, where time melted and reality frayed at the edges. As he moved deeper, the whispers grew louder, voices overlapping, some pleading, some warning, some mocking. He caught fragments of their stories, loss, regret, terror, and understood that each was a thread in the house's tapestry, woven from pain and fear. At the corridor's end, a faint light flickered, soft and blue like moonlight filtered through fog. There, sitting on a stone pedestal, was a book bound in cracked leather. The pages trembled as if breathing, waiting for him. Jonah reached out, fingers trembling, and opened the book. The ink shifted and twisted on the page, forming words in a language that felt both foreign and familiar. It told of the house's origins, a place built to hold those who had forgotten, a sanctuary and a prison, where memory was both weapon and refuge. The final passage chilled him. To leave is to forget is to lose yourself, and to lose yourself is to become the house. The walls groaned and the floor quaked as if angered by his discovery. Jonah closed the book and ran, the whispers now a roar chasing him through winding halls that twisted and turned like a labyrinth. He reached the front door, the key burning bright in his palm, and with a desperate twist, unlocked it. The door opened to a night sky starless and black, the forest surrounding him thick and alive. Jonah stepped out, breath ragged, the house sighing behind him. He was free, or so he hoped, but as he looked back, the windows glowed faintly, and in their light, he saw countless faces staring back, waiting, remembering, never truly gone. Outside, the forest seemed different, darker and more alive than before. The trees whispered in voices only Jonah could hear, their branches reaching like fingers toward the sky, blocking out the stars. The path he had followed was gone, swallowed by twisting roots and thick fog. He walked blindly, the cold key still heavy in his pocket, a constant reminder of the house's grip on his soul. Each step felt heavier, as if the forest itself resisted his escape, bending shadows and shifting the ground beneath him. In the distance, he heard the faintest sound, a soft knocking, rhythmic and insistent, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. It called to him, pulling him deeper into the woods, toward a place where the trees grew twisted and gnarled, and the air smelled of decay. Jonah tried to resist, but the sound wrapped around his mind, growing louder with every heartbeat. He found himself at a clearing, a circle of ancient stones worn smooth by time, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. At the center stood a figure, tall and cloaked in shadows, face hidden beneath a hood. The knocking stopped as Jonah approached, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed against his chest. The figure spoke without moving its lips, a voice echoing inside Jonah's mind. "You cannot leave," it said. "The house is not just a place. It is a promise, a binding, a memory that holds fast. You are part of it now." Jonah's breath caught. "I escaped," he whispered, voice breaking. The figure shook its head. "Escape is an illusion. You carry the house within you. It waits beneath your skin, in the spaces between your thoughts. It remembers your name, your fears, your dreams. You belong." Desperation surged, and Jonah turned to run, but the forest closed in, the trees shifting, roots grasping like hands to trap him. The knocking returned, faster, louder, pounding in his chest. He stumbled back toward the house, drawn like a moth to a flame he feared and could not resist. The key burned brighter than ever, a beacon and a curse. Inside, the walls whispered his name, and the chairs waited, empty but for one, the chair where he was meant to sit forever. Jonah's feet carried him through the forest as if pulled by invisible strings, the cold key searing a trail in his pocket. The fog thickened, swallowing sounds and shapes until the world around him was nothing but shadow and silence. The trees loomed like sentinels, watching, waiting for him to falter. He reached the edge of the clearing again, the ancient stones glowing faintly beneath a sky that had no stars. The cloaked figure stood waiting, its presence a void that seemed to suck the warmth from the air. Jonah's voice caught in his throat, but he forced himself to speak. "What do you want from me?" The figure's voice echoed inside his mind, calm and unyielding. "To remember, to become. The house is not walls and wood. It is memory, it is time, it is the space between life and death. You are the last piece, the final thread." Jonah's heart thundered. "I don't want this, I want to live." "But to live is to forget," the figure whispered, stepping closer, shadows folding like smoke around its form. "And forgetting is death." The air thickened, pressing in on Jonah, his breath shallow and quick. The key burned fiercely now, almost unbearable, and he understood, it was not a key to open doors but to unlock himself, to free or to trap. Suddenly the ground beneath him shifted, and he was falling, through darkness, through memories, through echoes of lives long lost. Faces flickered at the edges of his vision, voices calling, weeping, pleading for release. He landed hard on cold stone, the book from the house open beside him. The ink writhed on the pages, revealing the final truth: those who enter the house do not leave. They become it, and the house becomes them. To escape, one must forget all they are, lose their name, lose their memory, lose their self. Pain surged, the key splitting his palm as the house reached for him, pulling, claiming, remembering. And in that moment, Jonah knew the choice was his: embrace the darkness and become part of the endless waiting, or fight the fading of his own soul and vanish into nothing. Jonah struggled against the pull, the darkness swirling like smoke around him, cold fingers reaching for his mind, his memories, his very self. The key seared his palm, a tether to the world he barely remembered, a reminder of who he once was. He clawed at the shadows, fighting to hold on to the fragments of his past, the city lights, the letter without a sender, the worn streets he'd left behind. But the house whispered in 1,000 voices, each one a thread weaving him tighter into its endless web. Time stretched and bent until it lost all meaning. Days became nights, nights became dreams, and dreams blurred with reality. The chairs waited, empty now, save for one, the one that held Jonah's reflection, fading and shifting with every breath. He felt himself slipping, the edges of his identity fraying like old paper. The house hummed with satisfaction, a low, steady pulse echoing in his bones. It was patient, eternal, waiting for him to surrender fully. Then, in the deepest silence, a single thought broke through the fog, a whisper of hope, fragile but fierce. Jonah gripped the key tighter and remembered the letter's final line: "If you see yourself, do not speak, do not blink, do not breathe until it is gone." He closed his eyes, held his breath, and willed himself to fade, to become nothing, to slip through the house's grasp like smoke through fingers. The darkness tightened, then loosened. The walls trembled, the floorboards sighed, and the house held its breath. When Jonah opened his eyes, he was outside, the first light of dawn breaking through the trees. The forest was silent, the path clear for the first time since he'd arrived. The key lay cold and lifeless in his hand, the weight lifted. The house was behind him now, a shadow swallowed by the morning light. But as he walked away, the wind carried a faint whisper, a reminder that some memories never truly fade, and some houses never truly let go. The morning light filtered weakly through the dense canopy, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Jonah's footsteps were soft on the damp earth, each one carrying him further from the house that had held him captive for what felt like an eternity. Yet, with every step, a cold knot tightened in his chest, a lingering echo of the house's presence. He paused at the edge of the woods, looking back once more. The trees stood silent and still, hiding secrets that whispered just beyond the reach of daylight. The house was nowhere to be seen, as if swallowed whole by the forest's ancient hunger. But Jonah knew better. He could feel it in his bones. The house was never truly gone. It was a part of him now, woven into the fabric of his soul, a shadow lurking at the edge of his thoughts. He folded the key carefully and slipped it into his pocket, the metal cool and dull. It was a relic of a nightmare he hoped to forget, but the weight of it grounded him, a reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. As he walked toward the fading road, the air grew colder, the breeze carrying with it a faint, mournful sound, a soft knocking, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. Jonah's heart quickened, but he forced himself to keep moving, to leave the forest and its memories behind. Still, the whisper followed, a promise and a warning: the house waits, it remembers, and it will call again. Days passed in a haze, the city's noise and lights failing to drown the house's lingering echo inside Jonah's mind. Faces blurred, sounds warped, and yet the memory of the house's breath, the creak of the floorboards, and the soft knocking in the walls haunted his every moment. He felt watched, followed by shadows that danced just beyond his vision. Sleep was a fleeting visitor, always interrupted by dreams of narrow hallways twisting endlessly, of chairs filled with strangers who wore his face but did not speak. He would wake drenched in cold sweat, heart pounding to the rhythm of the second heartbeat. Jonah tried to tell himself he was free, that the house was behind him, but deep down he knew the truth: some bonds cannot be broken, some memories cannot be erased. The key burned quietly in his pocket, a constant pulse against his skin, reminding him that the house was never far. One night, as a storm rolled over the city, Jonah sat by the window, watching rain blur the world outside. The soft knocking began again, faint at first, then insistent, echoing through the walls of his small apartment. His breath caught as the shadows shifted, and in the corner of the room, a door appeared, old, wooden, carved with symbols he recognized from the house. His fingers trembled as he reached for the doorknob, the weight of years pressing down on him. The choice was clear: open the door and return to the house's embrace, or close it forever and try to live with the shadows. Jonah's hand hovered over the doorknob, cold sweat slicking his palm, heart pounding as the knocking grew louder, more urgent, filling the room with a rhythm that matched the house's unyielding pulse. He knew what lay beyond that door, endless hallways, whispered voices, and the chairs waiting patiently for him to sit. But he also knew that stepping through meant losing himself entirely, becoming one with the house and its timeless hunger. He hesitated, breath shallow, torn between fear and the desire to end the nightmare. With a sudden surge, he pulled his hand back and slammed the door shut, the knocking instantly ceasing as silence filled the room. His chest heaved as the shadows retreated, but the weight of the house's memory remained, a heavy shroud he could not shake. Days blurred into weeks, and Jonah learned to live with the quiet, the lingering fear, and the memory of a place that waited beneath the surface of reality. The key stayed hidden, buried beneath floorboards in his apartment, a secret tether to a past he wished to forget. And yet, in the darkest moments, when the world grew still and the night pressed close, Jonah could still hear the faintest knocking, the house's quiet reminder that some doors are never truly closed. The city's chaos felt distant, a pale imitation of the silence that had once swallowed him whole. Jonah moved through his days like a ghost, eyes scanning shadows, ears attuned to the faintest sound of a knock or whisper. Friends drifted away, unable to understand the hollowness growing inside him, the way he flinched at sudden noises or avoided dark corners. At night, the dreams returned with greater clarity, the twisting halls, the chairs filled with hollow faces, the breath of the house lingering on his skin. Sometimes he thought he saw reflections that were not his own in mirrors, fleeting glimpses of those trapped souls who had become the house. One evening, the knocking returned, not from a door, not from a wall, but from within his own chest. A deep, steady rhythm that echoed the second heartbeat he had once feared, reminding him that the house was never truly gone. It was inside him, waiting for the moment to pull him back. Jonah understood now that the house did not just remember, it claimed, and in its memory, there was no escape, only surrender. Jonah's world grew smaller, confined to a shrinking circle of light and shadow. Every sound seemed amplified, the creak of the floor, the whisper of the wind, the distant knock that echoed in his bones. He searched desperately for a way to break free, to sever the thread that tied him to the house's endless memory. He returned to the letter, the only clue left from before the descent, hoping for answers hidden in the crooked black ink. The warning was clear, but the meaning blurred. Do not leave the lights off for more than 1 hour or it will come. Do not sleep with the windows open. If you hear the second heartbeat, leave the room until morning. If you see yourself, do not speak, do not blink, do not breathe until it is gone. Jonah realized that the house's hunger was patient, relentless, waiting for a moment of weakness. It lived in shadows and silence, in forgotten rooms and broken mirrors. It was a prison and a predator, feeding on memory and fear. As the nights grew darker and the knocking closer, Jonah faced the truth he had long denied. He was no longer running from the house. The house was running through him. Jonah felt the walls closing in, the boundaries between his mind and the house dissolving like mist under the morning sun. Every shadow seemed alive, every silence a whispered warning. He could no longer tell where he ended and the house began. The key in his pocket grew heavier, a weight that anchored him to a nightmare he could not escape. Memories surfaced, the crooked letter, the narrow path, the cold breath of the house as the door opened without a touch. He tried to speak, to call out for help, but his voice was swallowed by the darkness, lost among the murmurs of those who came before him and those who would come after. The chairs awaited, patient and silent, as the house exhaled its ancient breath. Jonah understood then that he was part of a cycle, an endless loop of arrival, capture, and surrender. The house did not want him to leave, it wanted him to remember, to become one with its walls, its shadows, its heartbeat. And so, as the night deepened, Jonah sat in the chair that smiled, the key slipping from his grasp, and the house whispered his name, a lullaby of the lost, a promise that it waits, always, beneath. Time lost meaning as Jonah surrendered to the house's embrace. The walls pulsed with quiet life, breathing in rhythm with his own faltering heartbeat. Light and shadow twisted into one, a tapestry of memories and forgotten voices that stretched beyond the edges of reason. The knocking softened, becoming a steady thrum beneath the floorboards, a song of waiting, of things buried deep and secrets held tight. Jonah's mind drifted through rooms that shifted and changed, hallways folding into themselves like paper cranes. He saw faces in mirrors, not his own, but the house's echoes, those who had come before and would come after, trapped in the endless cycle of remembering and forgetting. The chairs surrounded him, silent witnesses to the passage of time and the weight of lost souls. Somewhere deep within the walls, the house whispered a final promise: it would wait, it would remember, and one day, it would call again. Jonah closed his eyes, the last flicker of resistance fading like smoke on the wind. The house sighed, a sound like the closing of a long-forgotten door, and in that breath, the forest grew silent once more. The forest stood still, its ancient breath held in quiet reverence as the house settled into the dark earth, waiting patiently beneath the trees. Jonah's name joined the countless others whispered in the rustling leaves, a faint echo woven into the endless memory of the place. Outside, the world moved on unaware, a world of light and noise, where the forest was just a shadow at the edge of vision and the house a forgotten myth. But beneath the surface, beneath the roots and soil, the house pulsed with quiet life, waiting for the next hand to grasp the key, the next soul to hear the knock. If you ever find a letter with crooked ink and a key with no name, if the air smells of old wood and fog, if the silence stretches too long and the shadows seem to breathe, turn away. Do not follow the path, do not open the door, do not sleep with the windows open. Because the house remembers, it listens, it waits, and once it has called your name, there is no escape. The forest never spoke, but some said it listened, some said it remembered, and some said it waited.